What's up, everyone? Hope y'all are doing well. Behind me is a 1993 Chevrolet S10 regular cab. It's a 2.8 V6, 5-speed manual, just a simple little truck. This is actually my truck. I bought this thing about 6 months or so ago. It was so cheap I just couldn't pass it up, and I hadn't made any content on it up until this point because I didn't really have any plans on doing so, but there's been a little change of events. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so the point of this video is to give you guys an in-depth tour of the truck, talk about some of the interesting stuff that has gone wrong with it recently. Well, not just recently, but the just awfulness of it in general. I'd like to maybe make this a project at some point because I do really like this truck. I don't want to just get rid of it at this point. I think it has a lot of potential, maybe even just for a stock restoration. Obviously, we have a lot of stuff going on right now between the 240SX, the Jimmy. We're trying to figure out what we're doing with the Crew Cab S10. We're hopefully going to start on the Chevelle pretty soon. There's just too much going on at one time, so this is going to probably be on the back burner for a little bit, which will give us a lot of time to come up with a good plan for it. So without further ado, let's talk about what went wrong. I'd also like this video to be a lesson for anyone thinking of spending $1,500, $1,000, or even less on a vehicle, because there's probably a reason it's being sold that cheap in the first place. I was so excited when I saw this truck. I looked at it, I was like, it's got a little bit of rust on the body, no big deal. Sign that paper, take my money, we're off. So I drove it for a long time. It was perfect. The truck was great. I didn't even look at the underside or anything like that. That's on me. You know, it is what it is. But I was driving it about a month or so ago, taking a real slow corner almost to my house, when all of a sudden the truck went boom. I was like, what happened? It like just lurched forward and stuff, and I just went over to the side of the road and everything's going crunch, crunch, crunch. So there we go. So this upper ball joint literally broke in half, like really, really bad. And as you guys can see from the clips that I'm overlaying, you can see just how severe of an angle this driver's side front wheel was sitting. The truck was not drivable. Thankfully, I was able to winch it up on my trailer and get it back to the shop. It's been sitting here ever since, up until the point where we pulled it up in here to finally get it up on the lift, see exactly what went wrong, and to assess whatever else needs to be done to it. So that leads me into what happened next. I had this awesome video planned out and everything because I wanted to get this truck fixed as soon as I can so I could keep driving it because I enjoyed driving it so much. I've really grown to liking these old S10s and Blazers and Jimmys and all that. They're super easy to work on. I just like them. But so to make things nice and speedy, I went to O'Reilly Auto Parts. I grabbed brand new upper and lower control arms. I was like, you know what? Let's just put new stuff on. Don't even fiddle with the ball joints because that's another thing that I'll talk about in just a second. But anyway, I got all the equipment, got everything I needed to compress the spring, pop the joints, all that stuff. So then I was like, you know what? It's probably a good idea to do a little bit of research, maybe start taking some stuff apart on this side to figure out how exactly everything is done, because I've never compressed a coil before and I just wanted to make sure everything was done right before I just started filming and fumbled through it. But anyway, here is the result of my test. This thing is, as my grandpa would always say, it is wore out. Every single ball joint is destroyed. The tie rods are destroyed. Everything is leaking grease. They're all cracked up. And that's just the start of it. There's a lot of rust in here. It's not that bad in the grand scheme of things. It's a lot of surface stuff, but it's still not that great. It's rusty enough that all of these like studs and stuff, especially the one for the shock absorber, they're so bad. Well, the shock absorber was so bad, I had to cut the stud off with my Dremel and hammer it out the bottom. Thankfully, the lower two bolts came out pretty easy. But I was like, you know what? Before we start putting X amount of dollars of control arms and other stuff on here, taking into consideration just how much stuff is actually wrong, this thing really needs more of like a restoration type deal. Like, it's got some rust stuff on the frame that's not too bad. I'll show you guys that in just a second, but there's no point in putting a bunch of money into this truck with how everything else is. It kind of needs to be done at the same time. So at this point, I'm like, it's probably better to just put it together loosely enough that I can meander it around on the property here, but not to where I can drive it back on the road. We'll just take it off of the road for now and figure out what's next. When the upper ball joint snapped, the upper control arm came crashing down onto the wheel lip, and as you can see, it just scored the outside edges. I think it's okay. I'm pretty sure it could be repaired, but it definitely shaved a little bit off and just ripped the wheel weight clean off. Taking into consideration that the entire front suspension is pretty much garbage, I thought it was wise to go ahead and investigate the rest of the truck, the frame, the body mounts, just to see how much damage there was, that if we decide to do a restoration series, I'm not getting too much into the hole before understanding like what needs to be done. So let me grab the camera real quick and I will take you guys underneath the truck and show you what's going on there. All things considered, the underside of this truck is actually really, really clean. These have a tendency to just rot away, but as you can see with the underside of the cab, it's almost spotless, and the underside of the bed is almost just as clean. Relatively speaking, the front of the frame is in a little bit better shape than the rear, but the biggest extent of rust is mainly on the surface. There's a little bit of flaking, but there's no perforations or anything like that. It still feels pretty solid. The brace that holds up the spare tire might need a little bit of love. I haven't taken the tire down yet to explore it fully, but just off of my initial looking, this back bumper is pretty much trashed, not just because of some rust, but it's dented pretty bad. Still figuring out what we're going to do with the truck, but if anybody has a mint condition bumper for a 93 S10, hit me up. Long story short, I've looked at the frame pretty closely, and if we decide to restore this truck, I'd like to take it all the way down to the frame, have it blasted, and have it powder coated. What damage is there, such as with the body mount bushings, which I'll show you in just a second, that stuff can be repaired. If that spare tire brace is messed up, that can be repaired, but the core bones of the truck are in good shape, thankfully. That being said, my biggest concern with the underside of the truck were the body mount bushings. This is just one of them. The problem with these, you have this rubber cup that sits in that groove, and then the cap goes up like this, but because of its shape, these tend to hold water. As you can see with this one, it's pretty much toast. I think those are actually little drains. I don't think that's from the rust, but it obviously didn't do that well. And when you look up at the body mounts, you can see just how much metal has actually eroded. It's supposed to be a nice clean circle, but because there's so much rustiness, you have all of this play. That's not good. When it's something trying to secure the whole body to the frame, that's not good. So these holes will have to be repaired. Lastly, before we dive into throwing this thing back together so I can actually move it, these trucks are very prone to body rot, as you can see. Overall, the body is in good shape, but it needs a little love. I actually did this when I went and looked at it for the first time. When the owner was there and I was walking around, I was like, oh, it's got a little bit of rust there. Crunch! Just finger right through. So That's all me right there. But there are actually, you can buy this section of metal and just replace this. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. I've never repaired metal and welded and stuff before, but I hope at some point with these projects I'll be able to learn a little bit about that so I can feel a little bit more self-sufficient with certain things. But yeah, so this is the worst section of the back. The other side is in perfect shape. This is the worst of the body rod, the front doors. The one on the other side has just a little bit of bubbling at the bottom, but this one is effed. The cab corners are perfect. The rockers are perfect. That was my biggest concern, but this is so squishy. If it hasn't already, that sucker is... No, it has perforated the interior. Sounds nice, doesn't it? The rot on the driver's door is just right here. It's like half a quarter size. It's not much, but this handle is broken, and there's actually a trick to opening it, which I'll show you, but the previous owner didn't know that and just kept yanking up on it like this and bent the metal a little bit in there, which that could be straightened out and stuff. But to be perfectly honest, these doors are perfectly interchangeable with square body Jimmys, S10 Blazers, S15s, the GMC S10 truck. Anyway, there was a lot of Bravadas, a lot of different options. So I have 2 parts Jimmys back there, and I'm pretty sure I can rob a couple doors off of those because I actually need some spare metal or spare front doors, metal from front doors, so we can fix the rear doors of the custom S10 crew cab. If you haven't seen that previous video where we took the body off of the frame, check that out. So what I'm saying actually makes a little bit more sense. So I'm probably going to use these doors as donor metal and put new doors from one of the parts trucks on this, and of course at that point, you know, we're committed to painting this thing and making it look nice. So that'll just prevent us from having to replace the door skins, which you can do. It's just like, why? If you don't have a parts truck, I mean, $30, $40 at a parts yard, maybe. Might as well just put different doors on it. I'm about to put the wheel on. This was the body mount from here. Check that out. There's the shim.
I think the proper term there was the shim.
Oh my gosh. What have I done? This was the shock that we had to cut out of this side.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Oh, by the way, I did find... Where is that thing?
Oh, did you find the top of it?
I did. It's right here.
Nice. We totally lost that.
I'm not putting another shock in it right now. It doesn't need one to be mobile. Here. Disclaimer time. Do not follow what I'm doing if you plan on driving on the street. This is not safe. Do not do it. This is just to make it mobile on my property alone. Again, this is dangerous to do on the street. Do not do it. So, interesting thing. Some people have actually pointed this out on previous videos when I was working on the Jimmy, but the Jimmy has had its original ball joints and whatnot replaced over time. This one has not, so everything here is still the original equipment. Getting this ball joint out was ridiculous. This is the one that broke. I don't know what you call it, but they're like studs. They're held in by studs that go through the top and down. They're not bolted. I don't know if they're welded in some way, shape, or form or what, but it was ridiculous trying to get those things out. I've seen some people using air hammers to like chisel them off. I actually had to use a Dremel. I don't have any air tools like that, so my little Dremel allowed me to just cut the tops off of the studs underneath to the point where I just took a pry bar and just popped it off, but it worked. So the replacement ball joints are bolt on. So let me go ahead and grab that. We can get this taken care of and try to bring the rest of all of this back up to it. So we'll just fit this on, and this piece goes underneath. This has the rubber boot to provide a bit of a dust shield. Get that down. Go ahead and secure it so we can grab the other bolts. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I was just going to replace the entire control arms because more times than not, that kind of stuff is kept in stock at O'Reilly, and it comes with new bushings and all of that stuff, so you don't have to worry about pressing anything. But with how everything else is, it's not worth spending that money right now. So what I'm going to do now is lower it down almost fully, but to where I can get the floor jack underneath that lower control arm. Whenever you're taking apart this front suspension, it's really important to try to take the load off that spring, because if you start popping ball joints and you already have the shock absorber and the sway bar loose, it could really spring back and hurt you really bad or do a lot of damage. So be very, very careful when you're working on a setup like this. But because of how this thing broke, I have the new ball joint in place. The rest of the suspension is all intact, and I have everything supported by a ratchet strap. So I'm going to try to take this floor jack, go underneath the control arm, and guide the upper portion of the spindle back up into here. We might have to loosen the ratchets a little bit, but with the pressure taken off with the floor jack, it should be fine, but we'll see how it goes. Let's see how that looks. All right, we're gonna have to loosen this a bit. Use the ratchet to draw it in. Raise it up. We are in. Sweet. That worked out all right. Now I just got to get these pressed together so we can put that new castle nut on, and we'll be ready to put the wheel on and get this thing out of the shop. Okay, so the ball joint is in, the castle nut is tied down. I'm going to intentionally leave out the cotter pin because, again, this isn't going to be driven on the road. We just need it mobile for the time being so we can figure out what to do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and take off these ratchet straps, put the wheel back on, and drop this thing down to the ground. Word to the wise, if you were doing this the proper way to full completion, if you're replacing control arms, bushings, ball joints, taking off the wheels and stuff, you need to torque all of that stuff down once the vehicle is fully on the ground. You can hand tighten it and stuff, but to make sure that, like for example, the bushings, to make sure that the preload is correct, it needs to be on the ground. Depending on how low your vehicle is, you might have to drive it up on some ramps, but just keep that in mind. If I remember correctly, the proper lug nut torque for these is 95 foot-pounds. I know that's what it is for the Jimmy, but for now we're just going to get them good and tight. Now that she's finally back on the ground and the wheel isn't falling into the wheel well, we can go ahead and fire this bad boy up, get it outside, and I'll give you guys a quick tour of the rest of it. Alright guys, we are inside the S10. Like I said earlier, this is a 1993 model. It's the S10 Tahoe edition, so it was the, I guess the Tahoe edition was the top of the line back then. Had carpet, these really nice cloth seats with almost like a velour type texture. Let's see what's going on here. All the gauges kind of work except for the oil pressure gauge. It's not actually that high. It's just one of the many things that need to be replaced. It's showing 179,881 miles, but I honestly don't know what it exactly is, because sometimes the odometer goes forward, sometimes it goes backwards, you know? Sometimes it just feels like getting younger. But anyway, so that is kind of what it is. But you know, these trucks are really cool. They're pretty basic. You could have gotten things like power windows and stuff, but I like the manual windows. Less complicated. These door handles are in fantastic shape. This is a weak point of all of these Blazers and Jimmys and S10s and S15s. They break right here, the plastic support underneath, so this is still in awesome shape, thank goodness. But yeah, it's got the typical dash cracking like all of these do. Depending on what we do with the truck, I can level it off a little bit and get one of those dash caps to go over it just to keep things fresh. Not a fan of that aftermarket radio, but it works, I suppose, for now. This is the most important thing. 5-speed. One of the perks of this truck when I first got it, it did have a new clutch and stuff in it. Let's see, the headliner has seen better days. It is not supported by anything, so if I'm not wearing a hat, it just touches my hair all day long, but you know, that's fine too. Vanity mirrors. It's a cool truck. The really nice thing about these in general, and especially with this truck, is that they are so easy to restore. If you can't find it in a junkyard, most likely you're going to be able to find it reproduction. Like, you can get original style seat fabric. I actually have different door panels from a square body Bravada that has this really nice unique leather insert here. I have a leather steering wheel from one of my parts Jimmys, so I might put those in here at some point, again depending on what we do, just to give it a little bit more of a luxury look while still being period correct and all that good stuff. But the interior of this is actually really clean. A little bit of boo-boo on the seat right here, but that can be repaired. Let me go ahead and show you the engine. Oh, and this is what I was talking about earlier. This is another weak point. The handles break. I'm not sure where it's broken, but where you see, if you're not careful, it's just gonna hit the body and bend that right there. But if you grab it, my friend Joseph, the guy that's helping me with the crew cab, showed me this trick. If you take it, push it in, like in and down, it opens. Otherwise, it's not gonna do anything. So figure out little things here and there to make life easier. And here's the engine. It's a 2.8 liter fuel injected V6. Definitely not the fastest thing in the world, but around town with the 5-speed, it's decently peppy. Good enough, I guess you would say. But it gets fantastic gas mileage. You could also get these with a 4-cylinder or a larger 4.3 liter fuel injected V6. I don't know. I like the little 2.8. The only things I've had to do, aside from changing the oil, is replacing a few coolant lines. But this thing runs great. It's smooth, it's quiet. It doesn't feel like it has 179K-ish on it. Give you guys another quick look at the interior from the passenger side. Again, door panels in fantastic shape. The Tahoe edition had carpeted lower sections. I actually really like this dark charcoal interior. There were a handful of interesting color options you can get for these between all of the square bodies from 1982 to 1993. They had brown, this, blue, red, light gray. Wish manufacturers did more colored stuff nowadays. It's starting to come back here and there, but allows you to personalize it a little bit more, I guess, back in the day. All of this carpeted stuff, the trim pieces there, all part of the Tahoe package, if I remember correctly. Some of the more basic models were just painted and didn't have all that extra fancy stuff. But yeah, it's a sweet truck. Even with all of its faults, I love this thing. We gotta figure out something cool to do with it. Well guys, that's pretty much it. Oh, I was gonna show you this back here too. Another little perk, came with a tool chest, which unfortunately doesn't lock, but it's helpful. Bed liner, the underside of the bed's in really, really good shape. Tailgate's pretty decent as well. It's got a few dents that need to be taken out, but there's no rust in here, which is a typical problem of all of these again. Before we close the video out, let's get some sound clips.
That's one cool truck, bro. Where'd you get it, dude?
Thanks, man.
Where'd you get that truck, that sweet truck you got? Who's it at? Sick truck, bro. Thumbs up if you like this truck. Drop a like. Can we get a million thousand likes?
So stupid.
That's what it is. Smash that like button if you love this truck, bro. If you love it, if you love Kyle, smash that like button. Can we get 1 billion likes on this video? If we get 1 billion likes, I'll cut my fingers off.
Whoa! He's serious too.
I will. I'll do it for the likes, cause then it's just natural.
That's cool.
Get it?
Oh my
Dude,
god. Well guys, that pretty much concludes this video. I hope y'all enjoyed watching probably the most relaxed Saab Kyle 04 video ever. If you'd like to see more content on the S10, be sure to drop comments upon comments upon comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget,
Leave a like.
leave a like. Show that support. It
Smash
really means a lot.
that like button.
But in all seriousness, thank you guys so much for all of your support. It truly means a lot. I hope we get a chance to restore this truck. I think it'll be a very fun and relatively easy project. But yeah, I think we got to figure out. Charles, the humble mechanic, is always like, "Stop saying that,
Don't
bro.
say
You're
it's gonna
jinxing
be
yourself." I need to start listening to my friends. But we got the 240 SX, we got the Chevelle, we got the crew cab, we got the Jimmy. We have 1, 2, 3. We have all 4 or 5 projects here together for the first time.
Wow, right now?
Right now. Wow.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's pretty cool.
Sick.
We got the 1948 Ford, but that's not really a project. Or is it?
Dun dun dun.
Anyway. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you on the next one.